On the 2nd of December, 1942, in a squash court under an abandoned football stadium in Chicago, Enrico Fermi turned to the man standing next to him. Fermi was the greatest experimental physicist of his generation. He believed nothing without proof. He had built this reactor brick by brick, 40,000 graphite bricks stacked in tights 20 feet high, uranium packed inside, because he needed to see it with his own eyes before he would believe it was real. Now the reaction was running, self-sustaining, exactly as one man had said it would be 9 years earlier, while crossing a street in the rain. Fermi shook that man's hand. The man said, "I think this day will go down as a black day in the history of mankind." His name was Leo Szilárd, and I was standing next to him. My name is Eugene Wigner. I am a Hungarian physicist. I won the Nobel Prize in 1963. I was there in Berlin when Szilard first showed me what kind of mind he had. I was in the car when we drove to find Albert Einstein on Long Island. And I was in that squash court in Chicago when the greatest experimentalist in the world shook the hand of a man who had seen all of this coming 9 years before anyone else could see it. Leo Szilárd was always one day early, and that changed everything. How is that possible for a human being? In 1928, Szilard saw the electron microscope, an instrument that could see objects too small for ordinary light to reach, details invisible to every tool science had. At that time, no such instrument existed. No one was building one. No paper had suggested one was possible. Szilard had simply looked at known physics and seen, fully formed, a machine the world would not build for another 5 years. He moved on to the next problem. In 1929, he filed a patent for the cyclotron, a device for accelerating atomic particles in a circular spiral. Ernest Lawrence at Berkeley built one and won the Nobel Prize for it. Szilard had seen the principle first. 2 inventions, seen before they existed, filed away, and moved on. Other physicists saw what existed and worked carefully forward, step by step. Szilard looked at what existed and saw immediately what it would become. He did not calculate. He saw. Now I want you to understand the world Szilard was living in during these years. Berlin in the 1920s was the center of everything. Einstein was there. Planck was there. Heisenberg was there. The greatest minds in physics were walking the same streets, attending the same lectures, sitting in the same cafes, and Szilard moved among them as an equal, at 25 years old, with no permanent position, no laboratory, no institution behind him. He lived in a rented room. He attended lectures. He thought. His friend and fellow Hungarian, Dennis Gabor, who would later win the Nobel Prize for inventing holography, said of Szilard that of all the many great men I have met in my life, he was, by far, the most brilliant. This was a man who knew Einstein personally, who attended Heisenberg's lectures, who worked alongside the finest scientific minds of the century, and he called Szilard the most brilliant of all of them. In January 1933, Hitler became Chancellor of Germany. Szilard had been preparing for 2 years. He moved his savings from a German bank to one in London. He packed 2 suitcases, and when the moment came, he moved with a precision that still stops me when I think about it. He put his life savings into the lining of his shoes. He walked to the train station. He boarded a train to Vienna. The train was almost empty. The next morning, the same train was stopped at the border. Every Jewish passenger was forced off. The borders had closed overnight. Szilard had left 1 day earlier. He told me years later, "It just goes to show that you do not have to be much cleverer than other people. You just have to be 1 day earlier." He arrived in London with almost nothing. He found a room. He read the newspapers. He thought. And on the morning of September 12, 1933, he read that Ernest Rutherford, the first scientist to split the atom, the most respected experimental physicist alive, had given a speech the day before, dismissing atomic energy as moonshine. Anyone who believed it could be practically released, Rutherford said, was talking nonsense. Szilard folded the paper and went for a walk. He reached Southampton Row. The light was red. He stood on the curb. One fact, one discovery from the year before, was sitting at the edge of his thinking. James Chadwick had just found the neutron, a particle with no electrical charge. That meant it could not be repelled by the forces that protect the nucleus of an atom. It could slide inside like a key into a lock, invisible to every defense the atom had. Nobody had asked the question that Szilard was now asking. Not what does a neutron do to an atom, but what does the atom do after? The light changed. He stepped off the curb. In the seconds it took him to cross that street, he saw it. If an atom struck by one neutron releases two neutrons, those two strike two more atoms. Each releases two more. 4 become 8. 8 becomes 16. In less than a second, from a single invisible particle, you have a chain of explosions beyond anything chemistry can produce. He saw it the way you see a room when someone turns on the light. Not step by step, all at once. Complete. He reached the other side. He stood there. Rutherford, who had split the atom himself, who had more experimental evidence in his hands than any man alive, had just told the world this was impossible. And Szilard, standing at a London street corner in the rain, had just seen that it was not only possible, but inevitable. 5 years earlier, the electron microscope. 4 years earlier, the cyclotron. And now, the nuclear chain reaction. A mind that saw things before they existed. Again, while crossing a street. He went back to his room. He did not call anyone. He did not write a paper. He filed a secret patent and assigned it to the British Admiralty, making the idea a classified document, because the same mind that had seen the chain reaction could see exactly what it would become in the wrong hands. And then, he waited. He kept it secret for 6 years. Think about what those 6 years looked like. No laboratory, no institution, no title. He moved from London to Oxford to New York, living in hotel rooms, always with 2 suitcases packed by the door, ready to move at 1 hour's notice, because a man who had escaped at a border crossing with his savings in his shoes understands that safety is always temporary. He survived on consulting work, on small grants, on the generosity of colleagues. He had no permanent contract with any university. He was always a visitor, always temporary, always one step ahead of a world that moved too slowly for him. And all the while, through 6 years of hotel rooms and borrowed laboratories, he was waiting for the moment when the rest of physics would catch up to what he had seen at a traffic light. In 1939, German chemists confirmed nuclear fission. They had split a uranium atom. The path to a chain reaction was now open, not just to Szilard, but to every physicist in Berlin. He understood immediately. He needed the United States to move before Germany did. And he knew there was only one man whose name could force anyone to listen: Albert Einstein. Szilard could not drive. On the 12th of July, 1939, I drove him to Einstein's summer cottage on Long Island. We found Einstein on his porch. Szilard explained what German fission meant, what a chain reaction would produce, what was coming. Einstein looked at us and said, "I had not even thought of that." Sat with that for a moment. Albert Einstein, the man who had rewritten the laws of physics from his imagination alone, who had predicted the bending of light around the sun before anyone could measure it, whose name had become a synonym for genius in every language on Earth. He had not thought of it, the chain reaction, the idea that now powers a fifth of American homes, had been visible to exactly one mind in the world, standing at a traffic light in London in the rain in 1933. Einstein signed the letter. It reached President Roosevelt in October 1939. The research that would become the Manhattan Project was authorized, and Szilard, who had seen it all at a traffic light, had kept it secret for 6 years, had arranged the visit to Einstein, and had written every word of the letter, went back to his hotel room. Because being one day early means that when history finally arrives, where you have been standing, your name is rarely on the document. Wigner said Szilard was always one day early, and that changed everything. December 2nd, 1942, 3:25 in the afternoon. The squash court was cold. About 50 people stood on the balcony overlooking the reactor. Physicists, chemists, and engineers who had spent months laying graphite bricks and embedding uranium. Everyone understood what was about to happen. No one spoke much. Fermi stood at the controls with a slide rule. He had calculated exactly how far each control rod needed to be pulled before the reaction would sustain itself. He had run the numbers so many times he could recite them from memory. One by one, the rods came out. The Geiger counters clicked faster, faster, and then they did not level off. The chain reaction was self-sustaining. The room was completely silent. And Fermi, who had built this with his own hands, who had checked every calculation, who believed nothing without seeing it, knew, in that moment, what he was actually looking at. He was looking at proof. Not proof that the reactor worked. He had expected the reactor to work. He was looking at proof that one man, 9 years earlier, crossing a street in London while Rutherford told the world it was impossible, had seen this room, had seen this reactor, had seen this exact moment, complete and entire, before a single graphite brick had been laid. Fermi shook Szilard's hand. I brought a bottle of Chianti. We passed it around in paper cups. No speeches, no celebration. The room was quiet in the way rooms are quiet when everyone understands that what has just happened cannot be undone. I wrote later that we had known we were about to unlock a giant, and that we could not escape an eerie feeling when we knew we had actually done it. Szilard said he thought this day would go down as a black day in the history of mankind. One day ahead, even here, standing in the room where his 9-year-old thought had just become real, he was already in the next moment, already seeing what came after. The bomb fell on Hiroshima on August 6, 1945. Szilard had tried to stop it. He had written a petition signed by dozens of his colleagues. He had argued for a demonstration. He had done everything a man with 2 suitcases and no title could do from inside a classified laboratory. For the first time in his life, Leo Szilard was one day late. That same week, he walked out of nuclear physics. He never returned. He turned to biology, to the science of life rather than the science of splitting it apart. He spent his remaining years working on problems in a field he had only entered at the age of 50. He died in his sleep on May 30th, 1964, in a bungalow on the grounds of a hotel in La Jolla, California, where he had finally settled after 40 years of moving from city to city with 2 suitcases. After leaving Budapest in 1919, he had no true permanent residence. He stayed mostly in hotels. He lived that way for 45 years. Einstein said, I had not even thought of that. Fermi built what Szilard saw and held its proof in his hands. And I, who knew him for 40 years, said this: if the uranium project could have been run on ideas alone, no one but Leo Szilard would have been needed. 3 men with Nobel Prizes. All 3 said the same thing. His mind worked differently from every other mind we had ever encountered. One man, a street corner, in London, a rainy morning in September 1933. He stepped off a curb and saw the energy that powers your home. Leo Szilard was always one day early. That changed everything.